In this module we're going to look at the management of a permaculture farm. So what are the ideas behind the setup and management of a permaculture farm? How can we create beneficial connections and do things like apply for organic certification for an organic farm? So the underlying philosophy behind permaculture production management is that the production of resources from a permaculture farm actually builds up the health of the soil and the overall ecosystem health of which that farm belongs to. It doesn't have a damaging impact on the surrounding natural ecosystems and can even enhance the habitat and the resources available to the surrounding natural ecologies and the species that occupy those ecosystems. So that's the philosophy underlying permaculture design. And then we also look at earth care, fair share and people care. So the earth care aspect is looking after the surrounding ecosystems. The fair share is that we share the surplus resources both with the wildlife and within our community. And the people care is that the production of resources within a permaculture farm doesn't have a negative impact on the people that either work that farm or the people in the surrounding community. So the idea is a permaculture farm enriches and nurtures the people involved in the production on that farm, and also helps contribute to the wider education within that community through running various workshops and education courses. So that's the guiding precepts of permaculture design, and then we look at how that can look in the different types of production systems. So in your Zone 1 kitchen garden, for example, you want to be able to run that system in a way that the resources or fertility to support that production come from the farm itself. So if it's leaf fall in autumn, if it's the manure of animals, if it's the cuttings from an orchard, if it's kitchen scraps from the household, to compost and recycle those resources to make composts that we can add to increase the fertility of those garden beds as a basis for the nutrient addition to support that production. In a similar way, in an orchard, we can look at what are the resources we require for supporting that production. How can we acquire those resources from our farm site, particularly by aligning it to the beneficial function of other elements on that farm site. So for example, if we've got chickens, we can bring them through that orchard, or sheep or geese or quail or some other species that won't have a damaging impact on the trees in that orchard. We can bring them through to manage the undergrowth and add fertility to it, as well as spread out manures and mulches that we may add to that system and help control any pests or diseases that are either in the understory or on any of the fallen fruit that we can feed to those animals. One consideration with that is having a diversity of plant species in that understory and aligning that with a grazer that is not going to damage the diversity in the understory that we're after. So that may in some instances require fencing off the actual orchard rows from the grazers so that they don't impact and damage the understory that you're trying to build up as a supporting guild of plants for the main crop that you're interested in the production from. Or it may be that you bring in the grazers for a short amount of time and they have a low impact on the understory plant community health. So chickens or geese, for example, or ducks won't damage too severely the understory plants and will be more interested in the pasture plants between those rows and focus their browsing and selection of plants from that community rather than the perennial plants that you've planted in association with the orchard plants. In a grazing system, you want to be able to manage the stocking level to a rate that the site can handle. You want to pick species that suit the particular characteristics of the site topography and nutrient levels and species of grazing plants available. And you want to be able to control their movement through the property so that they don't overgraze the grasses. And an example of that is cell grazing, where you move the grazes through your property for either every day you move them on or every couple of days you move them on, so that the particular ground in which they have grazed is trampled down and manured thoroughly, so that that plant matter is converted to beneficial soil manures and compost that will be brought down into the soil by the soil life very easily. And then you leave that site for weeks or even months before it's grazed again, so that the plant community regenerates in health and has the opportunity to draw down carbon from the atmosphere and pump that into the soil as exudates to help do carbon sequestration, which is where the carbon in the atmosphere is brought down and enriches the soil as exudates from the plant. And these kind of processes can have a big role to play in combating global warming. So in each production system of a permaculture farm you look at, you're trying to align the function of the species that you are present in that system in a beneficial way that is improving the health of the soil and is aligned to creating a healthy whole farm system, and also doesn't have a damaging impact on surrounding natural areas. And they can be protected, they can be incorporated along waterways as a way to protect the quality of those waterways and also offer habitat for the wildlife in that area. That habitat can be brought into areas closer to the house, so they can be brought into windbreaks planted alongside the side of orchards, and that will also act as a habitat for beneficial insects and birds and other creatures that can come from those windbreaks and help control pests in your orchard. And they may even come closer to the house and be associated with pond and wetland areas that can also be used to help filter the water that's flowing off your farm and remove any excess nutrients from that water before it flows further on and enters natural waterways. So there's a number of different whole farm productions strategies that we'll go into in the permaculture course, but this is just a bit of an outline of some of the concepts that apply in a permaculture farm. The other consideration is that once you've mapped out how that farm is going to be managed and the different production systems on it, you can bring together those thoughts and put it into an organic management plan, and also apply for organic certification at the highest levels of organic certification. And by doing that, you've created all the groundwork to ensure that the production on your farm is going to be resilient and sustainable. So it's not going to be organic as a consequence of substituting one product for another, but it's going to be organic as a consequence of having a balanced and natural farm ecosystem that can sustainably produce organic products, because all the resources have come from the farm and are being recycled on the farm to support that production. Another consideration is the impact of surrounding farms and creating a buffer from those surrounding farms, either from windbreak plantings or border plantings around the outside of the property, creating wetland habitats, or creating natural reserves as a way to buffer the production on your farm from any sprays that may be carried on the wind from neighbouring properties. There may also be contamination of the soil on your particular site, and that, in addition to establishing production systems, can be incorporated into a succession strategy on your farm. So you may not initially be able to produce the crops or the animal species that you ultimately want, but you may need to plant plants that will help to draw out some of the toxins of the soil and restore the soil health, or add manures and sources of fertility to that farm production, so that over time you can start to develop the farm production systems that you ultimately want. But there's a period of restoring the health of the farm system and removing contaminants from that system before you can get to the production that you ultimately want. So these can all be captured in a farm management plan where you map out what are all the production systems that you want, how can they integrate together. You put in all of your maps of your topography and your water flow, you put in your descriptions of how you're going to manage those production systems, and you also include any strategies around how you're going to restore the health and fertility of that farm system and create closed loop recycling of resources in a way that will sustain long-term production. And that document that we'll walk you through in the permaculture design course for developing can then act as a basis for submission of your permaculture design, and also can act as a submission for organic certification. So I hope you enjoyed the Permaculture Design Masterclass video series. There's some ebooks on the website to check out as well to help support the understanding of the concepts we've covered and to guide you through the design process on a site. And I've also included a bonus module on healthy homes, so some ideas around the design and the development of homes using natural materials and passive solar design. And there's also availability to join our Facebook group, our private Facebook group, and access the support available on that. I hope you enjoyed this series and hope to hear from you. Bye.